Welcome, everyone, to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. Today, we're going to have Alicia Bruce presenting her work, which is amongst my favorite type of projects, which is combining art and social activism and a real commitment long-term to the community with which she's been working. I'm very happy to be collaborating with her in depth on a book publication, which is shortly forthcoming. And we'll be reading her bio briefly before letting her take the reins and running with it. Alicia Bruce, joining us today from Edinburgh, Scotland, is an award-winning working-class photographer, community collaborator, educator, and activist based in Scotland. Her photography sits between documentary and staged imagery, focusing on communities, environments, and human rights. Alicia Bruce is a member of the collective Women Photograph and a teaching fellow at the University of Edinburgh. Her photographs are held in several private and public collections, including the National Galleries of Scotland, Martin Parr Foundation, and St. Andrews University. Daylight will be releasing I Burn, But I Am Not Consumed later this summer. Without further ado, Alicia Bruce, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. I think you've done a good introduction, and I'm just going to go straight to the video because it makes more sense in this format. So the video is, I call it a video. It's really a slideshow with music and spoken word, and it's by a Scottish singer, folk singer, playwright, and writer called Karine Polwart. And the book, I Burn But I Am Not Consumed, which I have here, the only copy that I have at the moment. The book's being published in July. They're all printed and ready to make their way to me. The title comes from Karine, and I'm just going to show you her video because she can articulate this part far better than I can. So there's no point in me describing that further. So what I'm just going to do is share my screen.
In May 1930, Mary Ann MacLeod from Tongue on the Isle of Lewis boarded a steamer from Glasgow bound for New York City in search of a better life. There, she fell in love with a young man called Frederick, whose family had emigrated to America from Germany 2 generations before. The couple raised 5 children. Years later, Mary Ann's middle son would return to Scotland, home of his MacLeod ancestors, whose clan motto is, I burn, but I am not consumed. And here, in the name of progress and profit and executive golf, he would pit himself against time and tide, and in his wake, the shifting sand dunes of Balmedy in Aberdeenshire would never be the same. That son of Mary Ann MacLeod is powerful, but so too is the north wind. The gneiss, the marbled metamorphic rock of Lewis, is 2/3 the age of Earth, amongst the very oldest to be found on our planet. It knows about power, and it's seen a lot. And so I wondered, what might that rock of Lewis have to say about the 45th President of the United States of America? Mary Ann's middle son, Donald John. And this is what the rock told me. O son of Lewis, lonely boy, hewn from granite, salt and sky, upon a foreign shore, the ocean is a mirror gleam in which you see yourself and nothing more. 3 billion years of gravity, of strata forged in fire and earth, the stone crib of your mother's birth, in which your forebears lie. I am alive, I am a tomb. I burn, but I am not consumed. I burn, but I am not consumed. Fish may swim at your command across the Atlantic, to the land of dreams and self-belief and boundless chance and exile tale and immigrant dance. You're captain of a frigate now, so set your compass, raise the mast, blow up the sails, erase the past and future if you must. Together we can stand and watch the peatland turn to dust. But this is your apprenticeship. The Gulf Stream doesn't know your name, nor does the splendid blazing sun that alters how the currents run. The north wind never heard you roar. You're fired, you're fired. My back might burn, the fires run wild, but I am not consumed, my child. The Minch blows up a spindrift storm. The Macher shifts, the Macher moans. From Uig Bay to Luskin Tyre, the gale blows fast, the tide flows higher. The shore erodes and disappears, and meantime you are stoking fears and stacking hope into a pyre. You strike a match. Oh, my bairn, Molyneux. Oh, my bairn, Molyneux. Your mother was a wee girl once who played upon my rocky shore. And you are a broken boy, and you want more and more and more. You build a tower, you build a wall. You live in fear that they might fall. You who see nothing but your own face in the sheen of the Hudson River. Oh, my bairn, Molyneux. Oh, my bairn, Molyneux. A balancing is yet to come, although by then you may be gone, and leave a desert to your sons and daughters. Still, these waters, they will rise, the North Sea Har will cover your eyes, despite your disregard for truth and your appetite for lies. 3 billion years of gravity, of strata forged in fire and earth, the stone crib of your mother's birth, in which your forebears lie. I am alive, I am a tomb. I burn, but I am not consumed. I burn, but I am not consumed.
That's the cover of the book. Here's the book here. I showed you it earlier. And Ursula, I should say thanks to Ursula Dam from Daylight, who did a fantastic job of collaborating with me on the sort of the visual nature of the book. And we went for a cover which is linen bound because I wanted it to resemble sand, and the sort of sand that I know from growing up in Aberdeenshire. So the cover of the book, that picture, it was made in 2010, so quite a long time ago now, 13 years ago. But it's also a special location for me because I used to play on these sand dunes when I was a little kid. I used to go there. I'm from quite a big family. It's like what's called a mixed marriage in Scotland, Catholics and Protestants. So there's a lot of kids in our family, and we used to go up there with my aunties, my uncles, and we would have barbecues at Balmedy Beach, which is just 5 minutes south of where the residents in Many live. And this sand dune here is part of a nature reserve, and the pillbox on there as well is one of the coastal defences. There's a lot of coastal defences up there, and I used to play on that very one with my friends and with my cousins when I was little. And I remember we used to sing Rock the Casbah by The Clash and jump off it. And I really like links, and a sort of serendipitous link to that is that Mickey Foot, who used to live in Many, unfortunately passed away a few years ago. He produced the first Clash album, the Clash by The Clash. And there's a beautiful quote which is in the book that Corinne Poarch used from You've Been Trumped. And Mickey talks about how he used to come up on the bus from Aberdeen with his grandma and his aunt and play bandy catchers on those dunes. And so him and his wife Kim gave up living in a houseboat in London and moved up to Aberdeenshire, to this remote, beautiful site of special scientific interest, for a quieter life. And then Donald Trump became their neighbour in 2006. So can you imagine the shock of coming from London to somewhere so remote? I mean, some of the residents have called it the land that time forgot. And suddenly you've got this American developer who's very attention hungry as your neighbour, and not a very kind one. So I thought a lot about the book cover, and this is the one that we kept coming back to because it's such a personal space for me. Not only that, unfortunately, this area is currently being developed into Trump's second golf course, which will swallow up the whole stretch of sand dunes in Aberdeenshire, which they are remarkable. They were remarkable. They lost their accreditation as a site of special scientific interest, which didn't have to happen because the developers could have worked in a way that kept that accreditation. So anyway, I was going to read from the book, but I think I've already got enough to say. I don't need to start reading out of the book. I'll just talk as I go. But that was the thinking behind the book cover, and the title, "I burn but I am not consumed," is the MacLeod family motto. Donald Trump's mother, Mary Ann MacLeod, who was Scottish. And you just heard the song by Karine. I just wanted to say thank you to Mike Itkoff, Ursula Dam, Gabby Fastman, Andrea Smith, and Sam Darby from Daylight. It's been great to work with you, and to SVA, Tom, Marco, and Sarah. Hello. I know you're all there. And then everyone who made the book possible. The list is really long because it was a Kickstarter funded book a year ago. July last year. So I think there were, I've forgotten if it's 164 or 364, but there was a lot of really kind, amazing people, and I was very surprised and heartened by the support behind this book at the time. And Malcolm, who's here, is one of those amazing supporters, and some of the rest of you as well, perhaps. So thank you. And we've watched Karine's video. So I'm just going to go into another beautiful thing that's happened through this book is the co-authorship. So working with different people who I admire, all women actually, including Ursula, who designed the book. And there are 3 essays in the book, one by Karine, who you heard before in the lyrics of her song. There's an essay by Leslie Riddick, who is a political commentator and a broadcaster, a writer, journalist from Scotland. She's written a lot about land rights and land laws and crofters. And Louise Pearson, who is a photo curator at the National Galleries of Scotland. And Louise was the first to send me an essay, and I cried when I read Louise's essay and said, thank you for getting me, because I couldn't believe how tuned in she was to how I was working and what I was doing. And it sort of aligned with her collecting policies at the galleries at the moment. They're trying to represent more a more diverse range of artists and photographers, and including that is working class photographers like myself. And so she's written an essay called "Scottish Photography Was Born Out of Disruption." And the reason for that is the most iconic portraits made at the birth of photography in Scotland were made by a collaborative pair, David Octavius Hill and Robert Adamson. And the reason they started their collaboration at early stages of photography was to make a painting of the disruption of the Free Church of Scotland. And in order to make this epic painting of hundreds of ministers, they made photographic portraits of them. And then they, David Octavius Hill made this epic painting, which belongs to the Church of Scotland now. But in that time as well, there was a man who lived not far from me in Portobello. In fact, one of the ministers lived in the house I'm sitting in now, that is in this, anyway, more serendipitous links. A man who lived in Portobello called David Brewster convinced Henry Fox Talbot, who, along with Louis Daguerre, they came up with rival processes to fix the shadows, and then photography became a thing. He convinced Henry Fox Talbot not copyright, I've forgotten what the word is now, so patent the calotype in Scotland, which meant right from the start of the birth of photography, a lot more photographs were made here with Hill and Adamson. And right away, right from the start, they did photograph what you would kind of crassly call the great and the good in Edinburgh, but they also they made the first social documentary portraits, and they were of working people who worked in the fishing industries in Edinburgh. So I love that Louise has sort of drawn parallels between this photographic work that I am obsessed with And she sees a parallel with my work in that. That was really heartening, and especially because they're sort of strong working class women families. That was another beautiful thing that came out of the book, and also the fact that they're fisher folk, and the residents of Many live by the sea, and Michael Forbes is a salmon fisherman. That's part of his family history. So anyway, tell me if I'm talking too fast, because I am Scottish, and where I'm from, you have to speak really fast or you get interrupted. So this is a reminder to me to slow down. This is Trump Boulevard. When you go on to Trump's land in the on the Many estate where my project is based, there are these signs which are yellow, and they've got Trump's self-commissioned Scottish coat of arms. He's made his own coat of arms here. So it says Trump and something in Latin or Gaelic, I'm not sure, and then slow. That's a good reminder to me to slow down. And Trump said in 2006, the year I graduated, I'm going to call it the Great Dunes of Scotland. And here's a developer's map. I'm just going to minimize this in my corner so I can see it better. So the developer's map, Ursula's added the names of the residents' houses. They're sort of marked out. And this is what Trump wanted. This isn't what happened. The golf course, first golf course happened. The second golf course is being built. But the future residential, the Trump Boulevard, the holiday homes, all of these big buildings here, they never materialized. So they aren't there. But that was part of the big plan and the sort of saying that they were bringing money to the Scottish economy. But what the residents noticed when they went to some of the first planning meetings were their homes are on this map, but their homes had vanished from the sort of the showcase at these meetings to show what Trump was doing. And so that was when tensions really started to build. They were approached by people, Trump representatives who weren't saying who they were, trying to buy their properties for well below market value. And then Trump started making them offers, again, always below market value. And so I guess that's the spirit of the project. It's that someone who's a developer and cares about making more money all the time can't always understand that sort of close link that some people have to the land if it's part of their heritage. So that's a big sort of steering point for this project. And so I used the map in 2010 when they started to build the golf course. I was trying to find a way to sort of piece together how I could look at how the landscape was changing and how I could almost give, because it's such a big place and so much was happening all at once and at different times, how could I sort of pull all of that together to show the landscape as it was in flux? So I came up with this idea to make a typology. I'm sure you're photography students, you know what a typology is. Photographing these plastic posts, pipes that were appearing in the landscape that were all about 6 foot tall, and they had numbers on them, and the numbers coordinated with the map. So I started to realise that these would be the golf tees or the golf holes, numbers 1 to 18. And I photographed them after many walks over a few months. I decided that I would photograph them all over the course of one day, going from number 1 to number 18, shooting with my Hasselblad with a sort of old Nikon, I think it's an SB28 flash, and always from the same distance, sort of, yeah, very photo nerdy of me, like same distance, always facing north. And I made this typology, which Dr. Katrina McCara, who's now at the University of Aberdeen, spoke really eloquently about the posts. And she said that it's playing on Ordnance Survey and an area which is being trumped. I should really have her quote right here. But she says, when you look at numbers 8 and 9, some of the posts are already bending as metaphors of surrender. And also throughout the project, I've been photographing. There's just so much. I mean, I've got thousands and thousands of photographs. I could make multiple volumes of books, but I think one is to do one well is enough for now. But yeah, how things were changing, and the way the local residents made it clear how they felt about Trump. by expressing things on their property. So this is Molly Forbes, who was in her 80s at the time. This is her chicken shed. And that's Molly's house beside it. And you can see the sand dunes at the other side. So you can see how close it is to the coast. Trump, the greatest liar. And this is Molly here. These are some photos, just snapshots, phone snapshots, a lot of them. So you get a sense of who Molly was. Unfortunately, she passed away in April 2021. But she was a remarkable, remarkable woman. She'd been a land girl. Her father was a ploughman. Her husband was a fisherman. And she's Mike Forbes, who you'll meet soon. She's his mother. And she moved onto her son's land. She bought some land from him and she called her home. You can see above this picture, me and my daughter here, she called her home paradise because she just felt like she was in paradise. She had everything she needed. You know, she had her hens, she had her geese, she had her garden that she could nurture. She was in paradise. And it was like that until Trump came on the go. And at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see Molly with one of her favourite paintings at Aberdeen Art Gallery, To Pastures New. And the third one along, that's the filmmaker Anthony Baxter at the first exhibition of the work, making his documentary, You've Been Trumped. And then Molly leading the March of Many in October 2010. So that was a protest to save the landscape, but also the fact that Donald Trump had just been given a doctorate by the local university, Robert Gordon's. So this is my portrait of Molly, which you can see is based on To Pastures New. So Molly chose this because what I do when I make pictures, I'm sort of like a conduit, I guess, for the people that I work with or the people that I make pictures with. I would never call someone that I was photographing my subject. It's not, sounds like something the royal family would say, and I don't think it's a nice way to talk about anyone. I see the people that I photograph as like, you know, active collaborators and co-authors in the work that we're making. So what we usually do is we pick artworks together often, and that's just sort of my style of working, I guess, and discuss, you know, how does that chime with you? What are we trying to say about you? Where do you want to stand in the photograph? What else or who else could be in the photograph? So Molly wanted to have the geese in her photograph, like the painting To Pastures New. And this picture's slightly blurry. It's got a bit of camera shake. And the reason for that, I could have reshot it, but Molly is elderly, that wouldn't be very fair. But as part of the story of this photograph, that behind Molly, where that field is, that's going to be part of the second golf course now. But also, the police stopped us when we made this photograph, even though it was on her family land. They said that they drove down the road just behind those trees where Molly is, and they said they heard there'd been unusual activity in the area and asked me to put my camera away. And Mike and Sheila were less polite than me to the police about that. And I made photos of the police quickly with my camera, and they told me to put it away. It wasn't an official visit, but they had come under the instruction of the Trump Organization. Molly was a remarkable person. She's just, what a legacy. And this is Susan Munro. It's hard for me to talk about these pictures because over the course of this project, these people have become very, very close friends. We became close very quickly. This is Susan Munro. And this is based on a painting called To the Bents by A.D. Reid from Aberdeen Art Gallery. And Susan chose this because this painting was made just 10 minutes up the sand dunes, up the beach, from where she's sitting in her photograph. And it's a figurative landscape, seascape painting of a woman fixing nets, waiting for the men to come back from sea. But in Susan's portrait, we've got her mobile phone and her cigarette. She was always chain smoking, so stressed by this situation. She worked for the local newspaper and lost her job. And she told me that her boss asked her why she wouldn't sell her property to Donald Trump. And the phone, because she used to send me picture messages all the time of what was happening in many, like in the here and now, including when filmmakers got arrested on our doorstep. And in the corner there, we've got the boundary fences that the developers were putting up everywhere. And the blood red tips of those, I always thought they looked like swords with blood on them. But Susie, in herself and in the land, was a very serene, beautiful person. Unfortunately, she passed away in December 2020 and is greatly missed as well. So here's Susie when she first moved to the area. Her with her sons on the beach with her mum, her pregnant with Finlay. And the house was a button ben when they first bought it, which is a button ben in Scotland. It's like a really small sort of rural cottage, but they built it up over the years to make it their family home. And it was very remote. They would only see people if they were lost, if someone had taken a wrong turn in their car and got very lost, or occasionally, and this is another thing, I used to go to beach parties on these sand dunes when I was a teenager, but I can say this wasn't me. Sometimes they'd get the odd drunk teenager or 20-something that got a bit lost on their way home from beach parties or had fallen asleep and sort of started wandering. But other than that, it was very remote, and they would walk through the sand dunes to the beach with the kids every day. And Susie says you don't walk a dog every day for 28 years without knowing every kink of the landscape. Of course, now we can't get to the beach. Many has become a building site. It breaks my heart. No one's going to have access to many. It's going to be a private development, and it doesn't seem to be about golf at all. It's all about housing. And this is just some photos of me and Susie throughout the years at exhibitions, holding an artwork by an artist called Alec Finlay, who asked us to take a picture for him at the where it was rural before. There's now that big gate that Trump's put out up on our doorstep. Us on the news, us with Anthony Baxter at the green carpet premiere of You've Been Trump, and just some other things. And this is a photo Susan sent me, but I also took a photo of her holding her phone up. One day I was out photographing on the sand dunes and she texted me to say, be careful, because Anthony and Richard had been arrested. Luckily, they kept their footage. So if you look up the film You've Been Trump, the documentary, if you're at university, you might be able to watch it for free. They managed to film their arrest because the police held them in cells overnight. They took DNA samples and they took their equipment away, but they got it all back, including the way they had been handled by the police. So that was quite a remarkable documentary. And there's a second one, well, a new one being made at the moment as well. And they were on her land, I should say. They weren't trespassing. And this is Susan's house, which was surrounded by, sorry, it's not a very happy story, but this is what you've come to hear about. And it's a privilege for me to document it. Donald Trump said, there are some houses quite far away from the course, but nevertheless they're in view. We're berming some of the areas so you don't see the houses. I don't want to see the houses, and nobody has a problem with that. I guess maybe some of the people that live in the houses have. And here, Susan's once rural property with an open view, you can see really high buns of earth, high hills have been built by the Trump organization all around their house. So blocking their light, but because he didn't want to see her house. And you can see Trump's car park and where she used to walk to the beach, but could no longer get past that area. Susan's husband, John, this is the only quote, John, I love John to bits, we get on really well. This is the only quote he's ever given me to use. So it's his quote for the whole book. I'm a man of few words. We aren't ragged trousered philanthropists here. So Ragged Trousered Philanthropists is a book you could read. And again, by emulating paintings or by appropriating paintings, what I'm trying to do, it's like the sort of symbolism that you see in a painted portrait. If you go to a gallery, often the background is as important as the sitter and it tells you a lot about them. So here we've got John in his hobbyist garage, and the writer, George Mackay-Brown, who's in this painting, wrote in Men in Bread and Gold about a hobbyist who he found a treasure chest and his home went into ruin, but the jewels were found in the cracks of this man's home. His home went into ruin, but he didn't leave his house. His home was his castle. And I think about that with John in his garage, with all the sort of hobbies and things. We've got the first aid cross, we've got the sort of evil eye and the sort of bolts that look like teeth. That reminds me of Trump security, who are omnipresent and stopping anyone who dared to pass a boundary or visit the residence or go anywhere near the area, also bothering the residents. And then the Kashik Stam poster behind, that's a Borat poster. I think it says it's from Zoo magazine, or it's from some sort of men's magazine, but I like that. I don't know if John put that up or if Finlay, his son, put that up. But it's a comedy poster, but also it speaks about the sort of developments in the Far East, that sometimes developers start to make these developments and then they abandon them depending on where the economy is. So I felt like there was a parallel there. And this is John last year. So a different, I find it hard to look at this one, but yeah, there's a different tone there. You can see how much he's aged and the sort of impact everything's had on him. And now Susan isn't with us anymore. He's got 2 granddaughters. I did say to John, we should get one with the girls as well, because he's got all this play equipment in the garden for them and it's really wonderful. And he said, "They're photographed more than Marilyn Monroe." I thought that was quite funny. He's got a good sense of humour, but this portrait, I think, sums up how John's feeling about the last 16 years. And this shed, here's one of the most real Kent folk in the area is Mike and Sheila Forbes. This is their tractor shed, and Mike redoes this paint every so often. This picture, I think, is from 2012, perhaps. No golf course, no more Trump lies. And this has become a tourist attraction. Golfers who come to different golf events at different golf courses in Aberdeenshire, because Scotland, we've got a lot of golf courses in spite of what Trump says. He said he was going to put us on the map for golf. Sometimes Mike will be sitting in his living room and you'll suddenly see all these flashes going off. And it's usually a busload of golfers who take photos out the window of the bus, and then the bus turns round and away it goes. So that's quite odd for him. But the media has been on his doorstep since 2006. So that's another thing. I hope you're all still there. I'm just chatting away here. It feels like I'm talking to myself in my own office. Sheila, Mike's wife, she said, "I've seen the northern lights from here, the aurora borealis from my doorstep. I've seen them every so often, back at the back where we keep the hens, the geese and the horse. I stop for a while to look, then I get back to whatever needs done. Where will we find another hame in a location like this? Nowhere in here is as amazing. I've stayed at the spotlight since all this kicked off. I just want to get on with it with nae hassle." And Mike says, "I've stayed here for 43 years now." This is from 2010, so he's been there a lot longer. "If I didn't like the place, I wouldn't have stayed so long. My history is down here. All my relations come from round about here, and there's nothing more magical than many. The wildlife is just outside my door, or it was till Trump came on the go. When the diggers are all working, you dinna see the wildlife. But since the diggers are gone for Christmas holiday, the wildlife is back. The media has been camping on my doorstep since 2006, but there's only certain media that prints the truth. All I want is to be left in peace, same as all the other locals. Just leave me in peace. The only good thing this situation has ever done for many is to brought all the locals together." And this is Mike and Sheila's portrait. And I think you'll probably recognise the reference that they chose because it's one of the most parodied paintings in history, American Gothic. And the reason they chose American Gothic as their reference, it breaks the mold because the others chose ones that were Scottish artworks. They chose American Gothic because Mike said he kent it would piss off Trumpy. He knew that Donald Trump would recognise the reference of American Gothic. And also with Trump Tower being in Chicago as well, there's a Trump Tower in Chicago, you know, it's one of the most iconic paintings from there. And it's only been exhibited in the UK once. I exhibited this photograph at the same time in London for Fix Photo Festival with Laura Noble. And it was in an exhibition called America After the Fall, American Gothic. So, and this portrait, as well as the portrait of Molly Forbes, much to my amazement, but like absolute joy, because it made them national icons as well as local heroes. This portrait and the portrait of Molly Forbes in 2011 were acquired for the National Galleries of Scotland collection. And the Scottish National Portrait Gallery's collecting remit is the sitter is more important in some cases than the artist. So it meant that them and their history and everything that they stood for and portraits that they had complete say in how they were represented are now in the national collection, protected forever. So they've become part of Scottish history. And for me, that was magical, something amazing to be part of as a photographer and as, you know, a friend of theirs as well. And I'm just going to read out, I'm not going to read out all the quotes from the book, but I'll read out this because it's important. And this is an audio interview I did with Mike last year. Trump said my house was a pigsty. When they tried for compulsory purchase orders, well, it's my pigsty. I said it's my home and they won't put me out of it. There's been no positives. He's ruined the dunes. He's just ruined everything. Everything he touches, he ruins. He scared away all the wildlife, apart from the deer. That's all you see down here now. Before Trump, you'd see otters, you name it, it would be here. He thinks he could make things bonnier, but there's nothing bonnier than nature. They couldn't put a clown in charge of America, surely, but they did. I went over there, but they wouldn't listen to me. He lost his seat. He thinks he was cheated out of it. I think he does. I hope he doesn't get back in again, because if he does, he will just take America to its knees. And that's one of the reasons I want to make this book. Hope that it'll play a part in impacting how Americans choose to vote. And these are some pictures of me and Mike and Sheila and my daughter. My daughter keeps reappearing in all these pictures, but you know, we're all friends, you know, they feel like additional aunties and uncles to me, the many residents. And we swap Christmas presents, birthday presents, we go to each other's significant birthday parties, all that kind of thing. This is me and Mike and Sheila when their photograph was first exhibited in Aberdeen at Peacock Visual Arts. Sheila giving my daughter presents. They're lovely people, and I always felt that they weren't represented as they really were, big-hearted, lovely, kind people in the press. They were horribly misrepresented in the local press, which I'll get to later. But nice things happened as well that I got to play a part in. And in the book, there's also things called tip-ins, which are lighter, thinner bits of paper, different sizes. And I've got things like articles like this. In 2012, 6 years after Trump started vilifying Mike, the public in Scotland voted Mike the top Scot, Scotland's favourite person, pretty much. So again, it made him a sort of national hero. And other people who've been voted for this award have been J.K. Rowling and Sean Connery, Andy Murray. So Mike was just flabbergasted. He didn't believe me when I said there was a campaign to get him to become top Scot. I told him at one of his bonfires, and we'd all had a drink, and he just could not believe that this might be happening. But that's him with the Spirit of Scotland Award, you know, beautiful decanter, Glenfiddich whiskies, like a prominent Scottish whiskey drink. Mike, he said he was just so nervous at this thing. He went up to give a speech and he said, "I can't, I'm speechless." And then everyone was cheering and howling and clapping. He went away. And then he went back up again thinking he'll say something. He's like, "No, I can't, I'm speechless." Because he's a tough guy, but he's also a gentle, lovely person. And I think this article to me sums it all up. So thank you, Brian Ferguson from the Scotsman, for letting me use this, and Phil, the photographer. And in the centre of this picture is Leslie Riddick, who wrote commentary for the book. So another serendipitous link there. And Donald Trump was so angry that Mike had won an award. Like, he hadn't done enough to upset Mike's life in general. He was so upset that Mike was Scotland's favourite person and was being celebrated that he organised for his own award, and he filmed himself. I think he shared it on Twitter with a member of his staff giving him the greatest something person award that he'd made up himself and filmed himself and shared, because he was upset that someone he said was insignificant to him had won something. This is 5 years before Trump became president, I should say. But it just shows how invested he is in this. And he also banned Glenfiddich whiskey from all of his outlets. And here's just some press articles that Mike and Sheila have appeared in. And they've hung intermittently in the Scottish National Portrait Gallery over the years. So I've got pictures of me pregnant there. I've got with my baby, with my daughter in 2011. You can see how the times are changing. But I love that I can walk in there, and although Sheila passed away and it was heartbreaking during lockdown, and well, just after lockdown, September 2020, I love that I can go and visit Sheila and still see her if I want to. Not that I go and stand in front of my own artwork very often, but I think it's the scale of the photograph. I feel like I'm standing with her when I see it. Yeah, it's hard to articulate, but yeah. So I'm not going to go over this whole quote because I'm reading out too much. But one thing I will say is at the end of it, Mike says, Trump says my mother reminds him of his own mother. Well, I pity his mother. I would hope he wouldn't do that to his own mother. And this, again, is a hard picture for me to look at. This is Mike on his own this time. A year after Sheila passed away, he spent a year sourcing granite, which is the local stone in Aberdeen. Aberdeen's called the Granite City. A lot of the city is built out of this sparkly silver stone. And Mike, as well as being a fisherman, was a salmon fisherman, was a quarryman. So he wanted to build this cairn for Sheila. It's like a memorial that he has built for her. It's got a photograph of them when they were young on it. And he invited me and my partner up for a private ceremony with just close friends and family a year after she died, and he buried her ashes in front of the house. And he said to me, do you want to get a photo of me outside the house? And I said, well, I've got my cameras, but I wasn't going to ask. And he said, no, come on. And he held this rose that Kim, you'll see later, gave him, a flower of Scotland. A neighbour had made him this tartan rose, which he then put down with Sheila. So it sort of references the portrait, the American Gothic portrait of them, but it tells a sadder story. Yeah. But again, you can see how dignified and nice Mike is as a person. And I think as well, like, I didn't tell him where to stand or anything here, but looking at this picture, it does remind me a little bit of August Sanders' Pastry Cook. There's something about that environmental portrait. You know, he's taking pride in his appearance that day because he's paying tribute to his wife. He's polished his shoes, he's ironed his shirt. He's got that sort of stoicism about him, but also a gentleness. So this is Sheila's cairn. I'm going to plant a tree there this summer. So, sorry. On to David and Moira Milne, who are also, I love them. I love all the residents. But David says it's when the proposals came in to sacrifice a site of special scientific interest that the whole thing really kicked off for me. That was when I took a better look at what it meant and what the trade-off was. I found there wasn't one. After all, the SSSI is a supposedly protected site meant to be retained to help keep the balance of the planet, and here it was being sacrificed for some unprovable economic benefit. It needs to be remembered by all that we do not inherit this earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our descendants. This is David's portrait. And it's one that I couldn't make now because his house has also been surrounded by trees and bunds of earth, but he used to have a panoramic view from his coastguard's cottage across the North Sea towards Aberdeen and to the north. And Moira talks about the destruction came to her when bulldozers arrived one day, ripped up a young wood, and then there was a lot of water lying on the land because trees drink a lot of water. She says that their house has become part of them with their blood, sweat, and tears. It's like their baby, and that's why she's holding a watering can in her portrait. It's a metaphor for, for developing in places where you're sort of ripping up nature. It's not always going to go right. And these are the paintings that they chose. We'll go back so you can see. And this is them last year, October, I think it was the 30th of October, 2022. We made a follow-up portrait. We tried to remake the previous ones and they didn't have the same, because Trump had put all these trees around their property. They didn't work visually, and they agreed as well that they didn't work visually. So we spoke about well, how could we make a picture that says something more about the situation? And what they were both saying is that Trump's actually done them a favour. They're still here. The campaigning, including this project and Anthony's film, it helped them keep their homes. It stopped their homes from being compulsory purchase ordered, for Trump to get legal action to throw them out their homes. And it's made them realise, again, that their home itself is more important than the view, because there's just something, again, untangible. But luckily a storm had knocked down some of the trees that Trump had sort of put down their property. So they wanted to stand there and show this gap. They could still see their view. They can see the wind turbines that Trump didn't want put in the North Sea. The clubhouse is behind them. But if you look closely at at Moira's hand, she's given a different message to the audience than she is to her American neighbour. So it's a double-edged portrait, and it's to show that they're still there, they're still enjoying their life. And it's based on this painting they chose, August Renoir's Dance in the Country. So as David says, first and foremost, we're still here. I'm not going to read everything out. You can screenshot this to read it, or you can see it later in the book. Just aware of the time as well. And so there's other portraits in the book. Wonderful Sue Edwards, who is a Chipping Up Trump campaigner, walking her dogs on the beach. This is based on a painting by the Scottish artist Victoria Crowe, the large tree group with the wind turbines instead of the trees. And Sue says in her quote that she's sure in Sheila Forbes and Susan Monroe's case, the aggravation with Trump and all that was surrounding them had something to do with their early deaths, because there were high levels of stress. And that Molly Forbes is the biggest hero because she didn't have any truck with Trump. And then here's a view of the clubhouse, again from David and Moira's. You've seen a lot of the landscapes already, so I won't talk in too much detail. But the book's also got a lot of archive material in it, including this letter that Trump wrote to Alex Salmond, the First Minister of Scotland. I'll read a wee bit of this. You seem hell-bent on destroying Scotland's coastline and therefore Scotland itself. But I will never be on board, as you have stated I would be, with this insanity. As a matter of fact, I have just authorised that my staff allocate a substantial amount of money to launch an international campaign to fight the plans to surround Scotland's coast with so many thousands of wind farms. It will be like looking through the bars of a prison, and the Scottish citizens will be prisoners. And then at the end of his letter to the First Minister of Scotland, Trump wrote, "Please understand that I'm doing this to save Scotland and in honour of my mother, Mary Ann MacLeod, who, as you know, was born and raised in Stornoway. She would not believe what you are doing to her beloved Scotland. And here's a portrait of Val Banks as well, who lives closest to Trump's property and has lots of stories to tell as well. She picked James Guthrie's A Hind's Daughter as her portrait. And again, Val's a remarkable person. And now we've got Kim, who was married to Mickey, who was the Clash's. Sorry, are people still there? I do feel like I'm talking to myself here. Kim, oh good. Kim was married to Mickey Foot, who produced the Clash's first album. So I'd say she says in her quote, you know, Mickey's punk spirit came out. Yeah. My late partner, Mickey's punk spirit, came through the campaigning against the development. I think everybody should have the right to experience wild landscape, especially as modern life has taken over with technology. So I'd say that Kim's got the sort of hippie spirit. She's sort of very drawn to the land, whereas Mickey had the punk spirit. So they're a great couple, and I was so pleased to get a portrait of Kim, again with the wind turbines behind her. And it's based on Jules Breton's The Gleaner from Aberdeen Art Gallery. And this is Rowan. I was at Rowan's on Saturday making a portrait of a couple who commissioned a portrait through the Kickstarter as well, but this portrait was made in July. She was unfortunately thrust into the media spotlight against her will, having gone for a walk on the sand dunes near the golf course, and she was filmed by the police, Trump security, and a local journalist who were all together. And then she was charged for having a pee on the sand dunes, which isn't illegal. If you're in the countryside, and as she says, a woman of a certain age, when you have to go, you have to go. But they turned up at her house, her rural property, late at night one night and charged her with, I think, breach of the peace. So then she took out a court case against Trump as a result. And Rowan used to live in Menny, but now she lives in a place called Catterline, which is south of Stonehaven in Aberdeenshire. And she's also part of the John Muir Trust and part of the Ramblers Association. So she campaigns for the right to roam in Scotland. And here we are, we had a women's march like you did in New York. We had one in Edinburgh, and Rowan was one of the speakers at that. And she made us, her and Sue, made these amazing hats for me and my daughter, and these aprons that we wore for the day, which are now in Glasgow Women's Library collection. One of many for Truth Not Lies, one of many for Love Not Hate. And even our bag there is a Tripping Up Trump bag that she had made and gave out to people. So here's some of the archive, more of the archive. A letter when I was threatened by Trump security. The one of the times, the one where they said they were going to smash my camera, he was charged that time with a full adult warning. And I've somehow become an unlikely spokesperson, one of the unlikely spokespeople for Trump's impact on Scotland. And certainly when the presidency campaign, the first one happened, I kept getting asked to give comments on the news. This is what the First Minister said. And the book's also got a timeline, a chronological timeline of things that have happened. And I'll highlight this page because it's important. The local press were so pro-Trump. It was unbelievable. Like, I'd have arguments with members of my family who were like, oh, just let the man build his golf course. What harm is it? These folk just want money. That was never the case. But the local council actually rejected Trump's plans, and it was overturned by the Scottish government. And these were the headlines in Aberdeen in 2007. The councillors were called traitors. They were threatened on their own doorsteps by members of the public. And there were posters that you could cut out and stick up in your window that said, "Stuff the council neeps, we support Trump." And all of the councillors' faces are superimposed onto turnips. We call them neeps in Scotland, haggis, neeps and tatties. And it's also got, you know, tributes to all the residents that have passed away over the years and obituaries. And this is something that one of the councillors said, Martin Ford, who lost his job over this. He was vilified for wearing a woolly jumper and cycling. They were his supposed crimes as well. He said land planning is about the appropriate use of land and buildings and securing orderly development of land in the public interest. The identity and motivation of an applicant for planning permission are generally not material considerations in deciding whether or not permission should be granted. What matters is what development is proposed. It is irrelevant if the applicant is Mother Teresa aiming to raise money to treat the sick, or some far from saintly person, or even Donald Trump. And then Professor Jim Hanson from Geographical Sciences at University of Glasgow, he said these wilderness environments are equivalent, if you like, of the Amazon rainforests, which I think pairs beautifully with 3-month-old golf course or 6-month-old golf course here, which was collapsing under itself because sand moves. And that Trump didn't advertise that that had happened. But thanks to Street Level Photo Works, hi Malcolm, I happened to have an exhibition during Scottish Environment Week 2013 and made this photograph the week before the exhibition, which I wanted to put in front of the members' lobby at the Parliament. So the First Minister, Alex Salmond, who was also the MSP for this area, had to come face to face with the residents, but also see the environmental impact was not, the financial benefit wasn't outweighing the environmental impact. So we scanned this at street level and made a huge print. I think it was about this size, about 50 by 50 centimetres, which was at the entrance of the members' lobby during Scottish Environment Week. And I think that's me almost done. Here's some more landscapes, which you've already seen. I've called this one Rape because the flowers are called Rape, but I think it's also the rape of the countryside. You can see the first golf course and you can see the sand dunes, which now are becoming the second golf course. And this is the 10-year anniversary of the golf course being open. The tee just happened to fall off the sign that day. And that's me. Hope there's still people there.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Alicia, you mentioned the second golf course already under development, and I'm wondering if there's a potential impact, you know, a groundswell of support may be catalyzed in part from this publication or, you know, the resulting attention, if there can be any pushback against that and a possibility to stop the development.
That would be brilliant if that could happen. I don't know if it's too far gone because they've got planning permission, but I mean, it would be amazing if, you know, this is the thing, like some people think, oh, it's old news, but I don't think they're going to realise until that sand dune on the cover of the book, when that becomes golf course and there's no public access, I think it'll really ring true. But if we could use the book to stop that, that would be amazing, as well as stopping him from becoming president again.
Is the Aberdeen Press still as kind of in Trump's pocket as before?
No. In fact, they've asked to do a review of the book. They've sent questions, and Andrea, your publicist, is talking to them.
Fantastic.
But also, Trump's executive vice president was married to the editor of the local newspaper. She got married during this whole fanfare of it all happening, but he's left the publication now and they've broken up now as well. So they don't have the same relations that they had before.
Alicia, one of the pictures that I noticed in the slideshow that I didn't see anywhere else was there was a fire. There was some pallets or something on fire. Can you just tell a little bit of the backstory of that image?
Yeah, that's every year there's a bonfire. Mike hosts a bonfire on his land, which is for friends and family, and we're part of friends and family, so we often go. And they have a big bonfire and a big firework display. He lights him and his friend light all the fireworks, and then they gather what they need for the bonfire over the weeks, and then they have effigies on the bonfire. One of the effigies is always Donald Trump. There was one year that it was Trump and Alex Salmond together holding hands. They put suits on them, they're life size. But in that picture, that's you can, if you look closely, you can see Trump in that picture. Yeah, it's a good night. I know you like your Eurovision night, but this is our
Sounds like a better night.
I love it. What?
That sounds like an even better night. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's good. And they've got their relative Anne plays the fiddle, and yeah, it's just a lovely sort of gathering, but also a form of protest.
And what you said, at least the second golf course is still happening, but these other parts of the development that was supposed to be happening, that never came to fruition, right? Where there were going to be more tourists coming, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can look on the website and see how many spaces there are on the golf course every day, which is lots. They try and get people in with all these special offers, like I don't know if you've got in the States like It's On or Groupon or that sort of thing. Sometimes appear on my Facebook ads like like I'm gonna book it. And they get Santa's Grotto and all this kind of stuff to try and get people into, because they've got the clubhouse was a temporary building, but it's got a sort of facade, so it looks like it's built out of stone. So they try and have events at the clubhouse, and there's sometimes like corporate events. Some companies hire it. A friend of mine recently, sorry Donna, because I've not commented on it, but she's a wedding photographer, and I saw that she was photographing a wedding there at McLeod House, which is the building that was there already. But yeah, she had details for the bride and groom, and they all had the Trump logo on them.
Yeah.
So people have their weddings there, but I wonder if they book McLeod House and then realise after they've booked where it is.
Right.
Yeah. So, but in terms of golf, I mean, Trump wanted to put Scotland on the map for golf. He's famous for golf. And we already are. Like St Andrews University, which holds this work in their collection, is the home of golf. And yeah, I don't know. But he's wanted to have golf tournaments here, but they're not hosting them. And he's also bought another golf course in Scotland called Turnberry. So yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the process of producing the book, the collaboration with Daylight and everything that's been involved with that?
Mm-hmm. It was intense, especially poor Ursula. I think she's probably still asleep. But in a good way. I mean, when something lives in your head for so long and you have to start communicating it with other people to turn it into a physical thing, that was intense, but it was great because Ursula's got so much experience. I think 15 years designing photo books, or maybe 25 years, Michael will know. So I just felt they were the right, I don't have it to hand just now, but it was this book that inspired me to work with Daylight. Marjolaine Riley's Growing Up in the New Age. I just thought it was such a beautiful book, and the other books I'd seen by Daylight. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it properly and work with a publisher who's going to make a really beautiful publication, so that, if I pick it up, I'm not going to be worried about there being lots of mistakes or bad print or that sort of thing, because that's what the residents deserve, to have a good quality record. So that was part of it. And also I approached Daylight because I wanted to work with an American publisher, because I think Trump is American and I want this to be in the Library of Congress collection, and I want it to be a part of history as well, of Scottish history with American history. It's one small part. I think it symbolises, kind of communities globally who are standing up against capitalism and protecting their landscape, and especially given Trump's profile in America, I thought that was a nice connection. But ultimately, it was because I like the quality of the books, and try to bring and Gabby as well, bless her, copy editor from Daylight. She was copy editing in UK English, but then also there's bits of the book that are in Doric, but she was looking at Scots dictionaries, and I had to introduce her to the local dialect, the Doric dictionary. So there were things like that. I felt bad because it was extra for Gabby, but she enjoyed it. She enjoyed learning all this new stuff. She says she did. But no, it was nice to work in that way and like to talk about, the format of the book, the timeline, how that would be structured, the tip-ins. I hadn't heard of tip-ins before, that sort of thing, and sort of, making it appropriate and not over-designed. I think Ursula quite liked to make things quite streamlined and subtle. And I think that works really well. And it was her idea to call the book I Burn But I Am Not Consumed as well. So,
Well, it's a fantastic title. Yeah, that's really terrific.
It's great. No, it was definitely intense, but I don't regret doing it.
That's great. Well, congratulations to you for that. Yeah. I feel like I had one. I wanted to, because it was something I heard about when you were here before, and I got to meet Andrew, your partner. If you could talk a little bit about how he was involved in the project. I know it was in a big way, but it was very and give him our regards too. Yeah.
Yeah, because Andrew, we give a lecture at my work. My colleague Torsten wrote it, and it's about art and science, and he says they're fond of each other. No, it's a drunken conversation between art and science. They're fond of each other, but they don't always understand each other. So that's me and Andrew. Andrew's a scientist and I'm an artist, but he would often come with me, especially at the start of the project, and many, one, because he was worried about what might happen to me, but two, to assist me. So sometimes Andrew would be halfway down the side of a cliff with a full, it's here, my Bowens lighting kit, with a full Bowens lighting kit and a big softbox, almost sliding when I'm trying to get this picture. And yeah, he would tell me off afterwards, but he would always help, sometimes reluctantly. Like sometimes he just wanted to get his slippers on and sit at home, and I'd be like, nope, the light's right, come on, we're going to do this picture. But yeah, he's experienced a lot of the things that I have, and he was there when the security threatened to smash my camera, and Andrew almost intervened at that point, but then someone else came along, another member of Trump's staff, who I think was worried about bad publicity and also had a child with them, and they sort of neutralised that situation at the time. And then the residents all came to Andrew's surprise 40th as well.
Mm-hmm.
The surprise 40th birthday party. So yeah, he's been really involved, and so's our daughter. Our daughter appears in the book. I try and make her unidentifiable, but it's part of her life as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah. And our families. I mean, they've all met my parents and everything. It's, we're all quite interspersed.
That's amazing how a project, it's a huge part of your life. It's part of your family. It's part of everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're lucky like that. I think that was when we were up at the lighthouse on Saturday. That's what Rowan was saying to this German couple that I was photographing. She said that's the best thing that's come out of this awful thing, is the kind of bonds and friendships that have grown as a result. Yeah. I think there's maybe questions in the chat as well. I'm not sure.
I think it was Malcolm sending his regards. Thank you, everyone. So glad to have sat in, and this just yet again underpins the importance of this project, resonant on so many levels. I have to leave now. Thanks again.
Oh, thanks, Malcolm. Yeah, he supported the project from the start. Street Level Photoworks in Glasgow, who that was where, this is another serendipitous weird link, right? So Marjolaine Riley, this work was exhibited at Street Level,
Mhm.
and I went over to an event where I met Christiane Monarachi, who's ended up being amazingly supportive of the book, and we're doing a Q&A together at the British Centre for Photography about the book.
Fantastic.
But the day I met Michael at this portfolio review, I had this book. We were in, it was a Zoom breakout room for Format Festival. Street Level Photo Works gave me the bursary, and Seb from Format, sorry. And then I got a message, a private message on Zoom from Marjolaine going, "Oh my God, Alicia, I've not seen you for ages. How are you?" And just before I met Michael, I opened the book. I hadn't opened it for ages. And it says, "Good luck with your first book."
Oh, that's amazing.
And I thought that's a sort of, yeah, that's the sort of things that sell me.
Exactly.
I just thought that's a sign, and I just have to go with my instinct here.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And we're so glad you did. Full circle. Yeah.
Yeah.